All right, well, welcome everyone to our 2021 Fall Conference, Uniting for Justice and Equity. We're glad you're able to make time this morning. This is our 12th annual Fall Conference. It actually kicked off last night. We had two wonderful programs, a GC Roundtable and the program on pro bono crisis lawyering, followed by a reception at which we presented the Trailblazers Award to Glenn Lau-Key. And you're now in our plenary session on anti-Asian violence. And we'd like to thank you all for being here, but we also would like to thank our sponsors for making this event possible. Our two gold sponsors are Broadridge and White & Case. Our bronze sponsor is the New York State Bar Association Business Law Section, and our conference sponsor last night, King & Spalding. So we thank all the sponsors. And before I turn it over to King, I would like to show a video from Broadridge about their services. So please take a look.
When you're planning for any type of financial transaction, you know there will be regulatory requirements to complete. And you know what really counts: timing, accuracy, and getting the job done. Attorneys face a high-pressure, time-sensitive process to make their clients' transaction a success. At Broadridge, our experienced service team helps law firms navigate the complex labyrinth of regulatory compliance. With the industry's only true end-to-end solution, we enable you to create, file, print and distribute financial disclosures, and manage shareholder communications seamlessly. We're your single source strategic partner, providing next-gen flexible solutions for document composition and SEC filings that keep you in control of the drafting process. At the end of every revision, you receive the proof in Microsoft Word for you to edit. Just one way our fast turnarounds save you time and money. And we excel at meeting your deadlines, never charging a rush fee. We partner with industry leader SS&C Intralinks, a market leader to provide you with a virtual data room with pre-configured workflows and unparalleled security, and beneficial holders. And those shareholders are critical to your transaction. So we help your clients manage their shareholder meetings and proxy vote tabulation. To engage shareholders, we develop cost-effective strategies, including enhanced proxy design and omni-channel distribution. To meet SEC regulatory requirements and to deliver timely, effective shareholder communications, turn to Broadridge, the team, the technology, the strategic partner to help you get the job done.
All right, and with that, we'll turn it over to Karen King, our moderator. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jeung, and welcome everybody to our plenary session. My name is Karen King. I'm a partner at Morvillo Abramowitz here in New York. I'm co-chair of the AABANY Pro Bono and Community Service Committee, and I'm going to be your moderator today. Our session is entitled "The Rising Tide of Asian American Hate and Violence, Where Are We Now?" CLE credit is offered for this event, and so bear with me as I read the required statement. AABANY is certified by the New York State Continuing Legal Education Board as an accredited provider. This program has been approved in accordance with the requirements of the CLE board for a maximum of 1.5 credit hours toward the diversity and inclusion requirement. The program is suitable for non-transitional New York attorneys only. Transitional New York attorneys will not receive credit. You must have pre-registered and confirmed for this program to receive CLE credit. The first page of the written materials that were emailed to you is the attorney affirmation, which you have to complete and return to cle@abany.org. Codes will be announced during the program. The code should be recorded on the attorney affirmation, and the affirmation should be returned as soon as possible within the week so that we can send you your certificate. You also received a link to the online evaluation for the session with your written materials. If you have time, please send in that evaluation so that we can get your feedback and continue to improve our programming. This program is being recorded for archival purposes. Your continued attendance in this program constitutes your consent to transmit, record, and use your voice and image for that purpose. So without further ado, let's begin with our program. We have an amazing group of panelists here to talk about today's topic. We have Hannah Yu, the Chief of the Hate Crimes Unit at Manhattan's DA's office, Professor Russell Jeung, Professor of Asian American Studies at San Francisco State University, and also the founder of Stop AAPI Hate. We have Hassan Naveed, the Deputy Executive Director and the NYC Mayor's Office for the Prevention of Hate Crimes. We have Jen Wu, a partner and my former colleague at Paul Weiss, and counsel to one of the victims of these incidents, Mr. Yaopan Ma. And of course, we have Chris Kwok, the chair of AABANY's Issues Committee, a mediator, adjunct professor, community organizer, and all-around advocate in this space. So thank you all for joining our panel. Very, very happy to have you here for today's discussion. We're not going to go into everybody's bios. Those bios have been included in the written materials provided to our audience. So everyone should feel free to, of course, take a look at that. We'll begin with a few questions about, where things are now, what has been happening over the last 2 years, what does the data show? And Professor Jeung, given the efforts and work of Stop AAPI Hate, which is really, I think, the one of the organizations that has done the most in terms of collecting data, can you speak a bit to what your organization has seen in that data since it started collecting, and I think it was March of 2020? And in particular, if there's anything that you've noticed in 2021 incidents versus last year, and anything sort of New York specific as opposed to the nationwide trends.
Thanks, Karen, and thanks for the invite to AABANY. I'd like to acknowledge AABANY's great work on this issue. Karen written a great report, and with Chris and Yang, and so AABANY being at the forefront of this issue of anti-Asian violence has been really helpful. We really see you as a partner. We at Stop AAPI Hate, so thanks. So we launched the website last March, and we have about 12 different languages, 13 languages where people could report. And the reporting has unabated since last year. So our numbers haven't really gone up, or we can't really track waves of racism or spikes in it because we're not necessarily a representative sample of that. The numbers, I think, that we have received that continue unabated is partially because now we get more attention and so more people are reporting, and also because the racism continues. And so I'll show you the data now as I share screen. This is as of the end of June this year. And again, the discrimination that Asian Americans are experiencing fall under 4 main categories. You could see on the bottom that civil rights violations make up 11% of our cases. We're getting barred from establishments, being denied ride shares. That's what I noticed initially in New York, commuters, people not being picked up. And so that was an issue. So we actually created a special category for it. Online harassment makes up 8% of our cases, and we know that cyber racism is really prevalent. We just did a study with our youth this past summer, and 70% of them said they've witnessed racist posts, offensive memes, maybe not directed towards them, but they have seen them. And because young people are on screen so much, this really does impact them vicariously. Microaggressions in the form of verbal harassment or shunning make up the bulk of our incidents. Again, these are harrowing cases where people are getting yelled at, having racial epithets slung at them, having profanities hurled at them. These are microaggressions, but they're actually traumatizing. 1 out of 5 respondents show signs of racial trauma. So that's 3 or more symptoms that are long-term like anxiety, depression, hypervigilance of always watching out for yourself or others, and avoidance of places or times. So that avoidance, that hypervigilance really are characteristics of trauma. And again, 1 out of 5 people who experience racism, even if it's not a physical assault, experience this. Shunning is actually also really damaging. A lot of people, especially our elders, especially immigrants who felt like they've never belonged, who've never been accepted, or the shunning actually, again, also triggers them and heightens their sense of being excluded. Finally, the last category, physical assault. We're getting coughed and spat upon at high rates. 8.5% of our cases have people spitting and coughing on people. So again, I always say, how do you know racism has increased against Asian and Pacific Islanders? And I say it's because in 2019, I hadn't heard of anybody coughing on their neighbor. I hadn't heard of people spitting on each other so often, but it's happening nationwide in really high rates. It happens so often, we again created a special checkoff category for this type of racism. And finally, physical assault makes 14% of our cases. Again, we're having bottles and rocks thrown at us. We're getting pushed and shoved. You see that in New York City a lot. And this happens so much so in our incident reporting form. And I saw how much anger and vitriol has been directed towards Asians, that I wasn't surprised to see elderly killed this year. I wasn't surprised, sadly, by the Atlanta or Indianapolis shootings. We've really reached this height of a surge of racism that's collective racial. It's traumatizing. It's going to have long-term mental health impacts. It's racial because it's not directed at individuals, but at us as a group, and it's collective, so that even if someone else experiences it and not ourselves individually, we still feel it. If we see someone being attacked on the streets, we see ourselves and we experience it similarly. So this is a period of collective racial trauma for Asian Americans. The trends have been actually consistent. Women are attacked twice as much as men, so there's an intersectional misogynistic attack on women. Men are using COVID-19 as a reason to attack Asian women. They were already attacking Asian women, but they are using COVID-19 as an excuse. Youth are targeted a lot, and elderly report 7%. They make up 10% of the Asian population, but if you factor in that elderly are much more likely to underreport, they're much more likely to have language barriers and not have technology, we think this 7% figure is really high. Also, what's been consistent is that even though COVID-19 has been blamed on Chinese, over half, 56% of our respondents are non-Chinese. They're mostly people who look Chinese, Koreans, Filipinos, Vietnamese. Again, in Los Angeles, a Latino was punched and told to go back to China, and in Vancouver, an Indigenous told to go back to China. So our data may not be representative, but national surveys have shown that 11 to 45% of Asian Americans experience direct racism. So that's 2 to 8 million incidents of hate this past year. Our numbers do show the patterns that are consistent, and of these reports, we can say that these types of incidents or types of discrimination are occurring. Again, not everything is a hate crime, and that's why we're calling for not only for hate crime enforcement, but more civil rights expansion would really help protect our community, and we're really promoting ethnic studies as a way to prevent racism rather than to have to address it when it's already occurred. Sorry, I didn't have the time to look up more recent New York City data, but this was from March. And you can see there are some differences. What's more concerning, I guess, for New York City and in San Francisco is the numbers of physical assault are much higher, or relatively higher. And the reason I think that both New York and San Francisco are have higher rates of assault, and actually New York and San Francisco have the highest reporting rates as well, is because in these cities, you have larger concentrations of low-income Asians who live in high crime areas. So they have more interactions and they're more likely to experience crime. Because of the density of the environment, because people have to take public transit, they have more public interaction with people. And whereas if you live in Los Angeles and you're in a suburb, you only pass by each other in cars and people make faces to each other. But in these more crowded cities, you have more face-to-face confrontations, more public incidents, and you see higher rates of discrimination and racism. So we have to not only factor in, racism overall, but again, the economic issues faced by people in these cities and the crime rates. Actually, another data point that we just learned is that Asian Americans who are in the service sector or in the working class, again, they face much higher rates, twice the rates of Asian Americans overall. And that's because those who are in the working class and the service sector have, again, much more public interaction with others. They're essential workers on the front line. So they have more interactions, more opportunities to be attacked, and they often have to work in more high crime areas. So
Great.
That's it. So I hope that helps.
Thanks so much. That's really helpful to see where things are at right now. Hannah, I was wondering if you might be able to speak a bit to what you're seeing in Manhattan specifically in terms of complaints or investigations, and has there been a difference in this particular year coming out, as the pandemic continues?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you, Karen and Chris, Young, and the leaders of AABANY for the invitation. Yeah, it's great to be here. Obviously not so great that we're still dealing with anti-Asian hate crimes and that they're still a topic of discussion, but uplifting nonetheless to see all of you here. So what do the numbers look like in Manhattan? Of course, I can't begin without giving a caveat. So first, the way we record numbers and statistics is different from the way data is gathered and kept by the NYPD. There are different data keeping structures, and there's a difference between an anti-Asian incident and an anti-Asian hate crime investigation. So with that, I'll give an overview of what our hate crimes look like in general. So right now, currently in Manhattan, of course, we have jurisdiction only over crimes that occur in Manhattan. There are a total of 84 open hate crime cases for all protected identities, meaning, anti-race, religion, gender identity or expression, all hate crimes right now prosecuted in Manhattan. And by cases, what we mean, of course, are cases where an individual was arrested, arraigned, and is currently being prosecuted for a hate crime or a number of hate crimes. So among those 84 cases, we have currently pending 35 open anti-Asian hate crimes. So it's a very big category of our hate crime prosecutions. There's slightly more felonies than misdemeanors in our hate crime prosecutions. And so the types of cases that we're seeing include misdemeanors such as aggravated harassment in the second degree, which sounds like a bunch of legal words, but what that encompasses is conduct such as spitting, liquid throwing, or physical contact of any kind, even if it doesn't amount to physical injury, verbal threats or physical threats, even if they don't amount to, action. So, for example, stop speaking Chinese or I'll kill you, but let's say that doesn't follow with actual conduct, that's still prosecutable. But we'll also see some attempted assault cases that would typically be a misdemeanor, but with the evidence that the conduct was racially motivated, that would be enhanced or elevated to a hate crime, and it would be elevated 1 degree, so it would bump up to an A misdemeanor. The more, I think, prevalent crimes that we're seeing are completed assaults, so assault in the 3rd degree as a hate crime, which is an E felony. So your classic, punch or shove that causes physical injury paired with evidence that the perpetrator was motivated in whole or in substantial part by some anti-Asian belief. The felonies run the gamut in our office from, like I said, assaults in the 3rd degree as a hate crime to criminal mischief in the 4th degree as a hate crime. So that's when property is damaged, and we'll see that in phone snatching cases where where the perpetrator takes the victim's phone and, let's say, stomps on it, or enters an establishment and damages property in a store. And they run the gamut to the more serious end of the spectrum, where we have 2nd or 1st degree assaults with very serious injuries, robberies, grand larcenies, sexual assaults, and as serious as attempted murder cases. So in 2020, we had 8 prosecutions of anti-Asian hate crimes. In 2021, we have 31, and these are based on the arrest occurring in a particular year. The incident may have occurred, in 2019 or in 2020. And some of those cases were resolved, leading us to 35 currently pending anti-Asian hate crimes. There are far more pre-arrest and post-arrest investigations that are ongoing in conjunction with the NYPD. And those numbers have also gone up significantly in 2021. So just to touch upon briefly what an investigation would amount to, that is when the NYPD takes a report, but either there's no suspect identified, or we're still investigating whether there is a race-based bias. So, it's the sad truth that there are 35 open hate crime cases in comparison to, 21 anti-gay hate crime cases that we're currently prosecuting, 12 anti-Semitic, and then a number of anti-Black, anti-white, and other hate crimes. So anti-Asian hate crimes are certainly in the lead right now, and it's sad. It's certainly it's novel. We haven't seen this in years past, and there's a stark contrast to 2020. But our office takes these cases extremely seriously, whether they're a B misdemeanor, A misdemeanor, spitting incident, all the way through attempted murder cases.
Has there been a change in the way the police are approaching these cases? I mean, I'm sort of assuming that it only comes to you as the hate crimes unit if something is being recorded and investigated by the police as such. Has there been a change in how the police have addressed these types of incidents over the last 2 years?
I think so. I think that, so I'll start off by explaining that there is a unit within the NYPD called the Hate Crimes Task Force, and they've existed obviously before COVID, but I think that with the rise in anti-Asian hate crimes, there is a greater awareness and sensitivity to these cases. So the Hate Crimes Task Force only gets involved when a report is made to a local precinct, either through a 911 call or through a walk-in report. And that local precinct classifies the incident as a potential hate crime. And as you could imagine, there's a lot that could either slip through the cracks or be missed at that early juncture in the investigation. So it's really incumbent upon the local precinct to identify that there's potential hate crime elements here. And when they do, they will notify Hate Crimes Task Force. Hate Crimes Task Force is a group of 20 detectives who solely investigate hate crimes incidents. They cover 5 boroughs, so as you can imagine, they're pretty busy. But our unit has a very close working relationship with Hate Crimes Task Force. Their inspector, Jessica Corey, is really great. And we get notified of all hate crime investigations. So any hate crime investigation that Hate Crimes Task Force is notified about, we do a conferral, and we're pretty involved early on. And that's in the best case scenario, right, where all the proper channels are notified. Now, in other instances where there's a let's say an unprovoked assault on an Asian woman who's crossing the street, and the local precinct does not correctly identify that this has, potential hate crimes elements, we won't know of it until the case is brought to us for drafting purposes. So when the case is brought to our complaint room, which is called ECAB, which stands for Early Case Assessment Bureau, an ADA will screen that case, and if there is evidence that there are hate crime elements here, they would bring that to my attention. So just going back to your question, Karen, I think that generally, yes, I think the local precincts, especially in precincts where we're seeing a lot of these crimes, I think Midtown South, the 5th and 7th precincts, close to Chinatown, are being vigilant, and hopefully the antennas are going up when there's an unprovoked stranger attack and the victim is Asian. The hope is that everyone's antenna goes up and the correct questions are asked. When they're not, and it's brought to us as a non-hate crime assault, we will do our due diligence and make sure that we're not missing anything. Sometimes, by no fault of the police, we don't know that it's a hate crime until much later, until after the arrest. For example, if the victim never hears the anti-Asian slur because their ear is ringing from being punched, or they had AirPods in their ears, but we find out there was an eyewitness, and the eyewitness is the one who heard the anti-Asian slur. At that point, we would then pursue the case as a hate crime on our end, and that occasionally happens. So yes, I think that there are increased awareness, increased sensitivity, but of course, as for all things, we can do better.
Great. Thanks so much, Hannah. Hassan, I was hoping to hear a bit from you about your experiences. I know your office works a lot with community organizations, and certainly reporting and education of the community and how to report and why they should report is a big theme that's happened since the onset of the pandemic. What are you seeing on the ground, and do you think there has been a change in sort of patterns coming out of community victims?
Thank you so much, Karen. Hello, folks. Hassan, Naveed. Also, thank you so much to AABANY for inviting the Office of Prevention of Hate Crimes. Just to kind of give folks a little bit about who we are, because we are a brand new sort of office here in the city. We came about in 2019, at the end of 2019, after we were seeing some increases in hate crimes impacting a variety of communities. Obviously, we had a different political context then, and it was obviously a different presidential era, right? And in that time itself, we saw things across the country in which the city itself said, listen, we need to address these issues with hate crimes. We saw the horrible anti-Semitic incidents in 2019 into early 2020. And so our office was created with urgency by Mayor Bill de Blasio to really coordinate the city's response to hate crimes. And so, yes, we work with community organizations, a great number of them throughout the city. And then we also lead an interagency working group that primarily focuses on Stop Asian Hate, or the issues impacting AAPI communities here in the city. And within that working group that we've established, we work with city agencies all the way from the New York City Police Department. All the DA's offices are on those as well, too, the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, the city's Commission on Human Rights. And we're literally engaging on a weekly, bi-weekly basis, really trying to figure out what strategies we can put forward to be able to get folks to report, to be able to have a better understanding of the issues on the ground, right? And also what programming works. And we'll go over some of that as I'm speaking onwards. And so with, when it comes to some of the numbers on the ground, let me just show you what we're at here. Let me pull up, 1 second, there we go. And so we're looking at some of the numbers right now, and this is the numbers that have come about just in the first 3 quarters of, of this year itself. So it's the first 3 quarters versus the full year numbers in the past. We've seen a substantial increase, of course, when it comes to hate crimes impacting AAPI communities in the city. And just 2020 was the year of the pandemic, obviously one of the main years at the beginning of the year. And we were hit early February and March with this issue. And that's when we began convening our working group with other city agencies and really discussing where this issue is going. And so 33 is a pretty low number. These are all NYPD numbers. And just to provide some context, we don't base our entire intervention or community strategy just on NYPD numbers, because we understand that those numbers itself represent, a particular, the incidents may have already happened. It might be that those folks may have a comfort level in reporting to the police department. So our community organization engagement really goes down to providing to getting a better comprehensive idea of what is going on. So we'll talk to organizations on the ground about what they're seeing, also where they're seeing it, and how we can end up integrating that information into our larger strategy. Because when we engage with these when we engage on our strategy and trying to work towards prevention and response, which we'll talk in a bit, we want to be able to meet communities where they're at. We know that when it comes to underreporting, it is a systemic issue. It is always a consideration in anything and everything that we do with relation to our efforts, right? And so we're looking at 130 so far this year. And these are hate crime task force numbers. And what's unique about in the last year of, sort of what numbers the NYPD has been releasing is that they've also turned to giving us raw numbers that haven't been classified as hate crimes, but are in the process of the investigation of what a hate crime is, right? Or whether it's a hate crime or not. And so with those numbers that are coming in, we're able to get this broad sort of idea of what's happening, comparing it to community numbers. We see overlaps, and then we don't see overlaps. Where we don't see overlaps in those areas where there might be incidents in Flushing, in Chinatown, in other parts of the city that don't necessarily end up making it to our radar, right? As you can see here, this is sort of the sort of data visualization of what's happening, right, in the city itself. Within just 2021, we end up also making those areas in consideration of what we're working on. And so as we've seen these numbers increasing, as we've seen stuff happening, our city agencies collectively, it was our office, the Office of Prevention of Hate Crimes, working with the city's Commission on Human Rights, all the DA's offices in this city, the NYPD, ended up conducting a series of 150 town halls, community meetings in multiple languages throughout the city. I mean, I remember sitting in a town hall with having, it was like the United Nations. You have, the plugin and you have different channels in different languages. And we're speaking to folks throughout the city on where to report, how to report, offering options with relation to the NYPD, to the DA's offices. And I can tell you that, one of the events we had roughly, I think it was 1,200 folks calling in. We had people calling in via phone and broadcasting it through the stores that they're at, or even in the senior centers itself throughout the city, and really encouraging folks to also report directly to the precincts itself, as well as to 911, or go directly to the DA's offices, as well as community organizations that are providing services. And so the numbers that we're seeing here, again, are just a fraction of what is happening, right? What might be happening, because there are barriers to reporting, and we have to be honest in acknowledging that, right? And engaging with communities to determine, well, how can we compensate for those barriers, right? Not just focusing on hate crime numbers, but also looking at the numbers that we saw previously with the professor, right, Dr. Jeung, in seeing the numbers with how community organizations are collecting locally and figuring out what would be the best way for us to go in and to be able to work towards getting a better comprehensive idea of the picture. And so with this increase in reporting that we've seen, I think it very much has to do with the fact that city agencies, community organizations, our investment into community organizations right now have really gone above and beyond and making sure that we're working directly with communities where they're at. If that means that we're putting out messages through WeChat, Kakao Talk, whatever it might be that are culturally competent, us getting folks to report, then that's exactly what we're doing. I will say, like in my work in hate crimes in the last 10 years, the real sort of approach that we really work towards as a city in working with community organizations was something completely brand new, right? I was surprised that we were really going towards to senior centers, food pantries, passing out information, working towards information and getting folks to report, and knowing that there's resources out there. And if folks don't feel comfortable reporting to law enforcement, the police department, the DA's offices, we want to ensure and make sure that there are resources and services available for folks to get that doesn't necessarily have to end up making someone feel like they're vulnerable in those situations. And so even that information that's coming in provides us with a better idea of how we need to accommodate what the community's needs are overall.
Great. Thank you so much. That's very, very helpful to know about. So thanks so much, Hassan, for telling us about those that outreach and that program, your new program. Chris, can I turn to you and ask you to speak a bit about the work that you and others have done in advocacy and meeting with the mayor's office, the DA's office, various elected officials, various candidates running for office, and tell us a bit about whether that's had an impact and what you're hearing as people become more attuned and more sensitive to these issues.
I think it's had an impact. I'm not sure if we've yet seen the result of that impact, but we do the work because we're hopeful that it will come out in the medium and long term. And, we are past the sort of intense media gaze, which really dominated the first half of this year. I mean, this year feels like many years, actually. I don't know if the beginning of the year feels like 2 years ago, And so speaking with all the complex sort of, there's 5 DA offices in New York City, each borough, New York State, federal, city. People in government are there because they want to do the right thing. They care about public service, but they cannot be experts on everything. And so when there is an issue, when there is a problem that presents itself, and anti-Asian hate certainly is one, they turn to the community to look for experts that can help them. And the Asian American community, as it is, did not have that expertise. Its community organizations were not previously well-funded. All that has really changed all within this year. I have seen sort of resources flow into Asian American community organizations in a way that has never before in the last 40 or 50 years. So we are in the middle of a shift and a change, and we are building our expertise. AABANY, through all the wonderful folks who are here in all the work that we've been doing, we're building the bridge as we cross it. We're trying to be experts because, there wasn't a lot there. We didn't have that sort of richness. And so at the same time that we're building the bridge, we're turning around, and as soon as we build one block, we turn around and we talk to different constituent parts of government and try to bring them along with what we think we know and try to be advocates for where we see gaps. And we want to, teach them what we've learned. We want to learn with them together. And then we also want to hold them accountable if we think that there are things that can be done better. And that is a role that we're learning. And it's really, it's exciting because instead of feeling hopeless, we're doing something. But it is really just kind of happening all right now.
Great. Jen, I know you are representing a client for these issues, and I know you can't talk about the details of a particular case, but I'm wondering if you could speak to generally, how you've navigated the challenges of representing a client in the space, and whether there are sort of particular challenges with the community or reluctance to report or anything, in that nature that you can share with us.
Yeah, I mean, I always think that these sessions on like rising tide of kind of anti-Asian hate should be followed by like mental health meditation, because I think that this is a very challenging moment for our community. And I really think that, all of us, especially the folks who are on this kind of participating and attending this fall conference are fighting a war on really 3 fronts. There's the first front, which is really kind of what Hannah and Hassan are talking about, which is how do we help people who have been hurt? And on that front, I think from somebody who's at a sort of big, corporate law firm, as Karen knows from having been here, I think our pro bono efforts are really in partnership with, for example, the Asian American Alliance for Justice. We are referred, anti-Asian hate crime victims are referred to us and we call them. I would say in general, there's a desire not to report while we are representing certain, kind of clients who, have reported or, whose cases are ongoing, which I can't really discuss. There are definitely 5 or 6 clients who have contacted who have never returned our call, or even when we get them on the phone, they say, we're fine. We would prefer not to pursue this. So that's sort of, kind of one area where I think, that we're trying to help. There's a second area within the law firm. I think this goes to one of the questions that came in from Rachel, which is what about unconscious bias? But within the law firm, there is just a heightened awareness of Asian American issues. I have been repeatedly told 2 things by people within the law firm since this all started. I've been told first, is it really true that Asian Americans are minorities? And I think that that's something that Chris and others have experienced with, where we have to go back to the Chinese Exclusion Act and explain that while the color of my skin may be closer to white than say Black, that doesn't mean that we are not minorities, right? And I think that that's something that has been eye-opening for me. But the fact I can have that discussion, I feel myself feeling lucky about it, less, kind of more lucky than not. And the fact that Chris, for example, has come and spoken, at our firm, which has really not happened in the past, is sort of like we're in a moment, right? People are aware of these issues and there's something to kind of take hold of, but there's also a challenge there because we're sort of feeling that out as well. And I'm going to come back to the sort of, Asian hate crime victims in a second, but that's sort of the second kind of area I think about within the law firm. And I think with respect to, I think one of the questions on unconscious bias, yes, there's unconscious bias and typically we don't talk about it, but now we are. And so I think that that's a positive outcome of just sort of the awareness, anti-Asian hate, all the good work that Professor Jeung has been doing and all the organizations have been doing. And then there's a third front, which I think is very kind of present for many of us, but as a parent, I know Karen and Chris are parents. I'm not sure if Hannah and Hassan are, but how do I explain as a mother to my 3 young children what's going on in the world? We were in Central Park literally last week going to a Halloween party and somebody shoved me. And I don't know if it was a hate crime. I don't know if it was Asian. I was definitely the only Asian person there. But fortunately, we were coming from a Little League and I had like a giant bat with me. And I just kind of like raised it and then the person ran away, right? And I wasn't hurt or anything. But I think that these things, like typically if I get shoved in New York, I don't think, oh my gosh, I'm being targeted. But I did have a moment of looking around and being like, am I the only Asian person there? And I was, right? But in front of your kids, how do you explain what's going on and what it is that I'm feeling in that moment? And I chose sort of not to react, I think. But I did think about, how do we tell the next generation that what our generation is doing? What is the responsibility of our generation to say, like, in this moment of great anti-Asian sort of, energy, what do we do to make life better? I know at Harvard, we now have Asian American studies because there was a huge monetary donation. Money pouring in is like a big deal. And that's one of the huge outcomes of this entire movement. And that brings me full circle back to sort of like anti-Asian hate crimes. One of the key components of anti-Asian hate crime sort of representation that has been very challenging is the amount of money that is poured in to victims. While it may seem that the money is going to make life easier, oftentimes if you're giving money to an immigrant community, which has never dealt with money, we don't have the infrastructure or sort of, kind of sage, wise, experienced counsel in place to manage amounts of money that are beyond what most people have sort of seen. And what we've seen is sort of a scramble for the money from people who don't have money, whether it's from the victims' families or from community activists or people who are just do-gooders saying, I can help you invest the money. I don't know how much time I've been offered life insurance, but I can say now, having worked with a lot of Chinese translators, almost all of them have offered to sell me life insurance. And they're like, you're like an untapped potential. Like you could sell this to all your partners. Not interested in selling life insurance. I just want to help for free, right? And that brings me to sort of my final point, which is there's really a distinction in my mind between Asian Americans and Asians. And that distinction has never been so stark as it has been now. as an Asian American, I feel like providing my volunteer free services, like doing something like this panel for free, is freely given. This seems normal to me because this aspect of giving back to your community is part of being sort of, I'm the child of immigrants. I feel like I've gotten so much from this country. I want to give back for free. But for many people who are immigrants, including my own parents, there is nothing that is had for free. So when I offer something for free to an anti-Asian hate crime victim, there is sometimes suspicion that I want something back and that I want to cut down the road. And that's like a cultural difference that I don't know that I had ever encountered in my own pro bono work, even though I've done a lot of death penalty work, I've done sort of Innocence Project, I've done a lot of stuff around sort of shaken baby syndrome. But this idea of working with the community in which nothing is given for free and everything's sort of tit for tat, I think can create cultural challenges and representations by Asian Americans, of really kind of folks from Asia who are more part of what I would call the old country. And I've had long conversations with my parents about this, where to try to understand, what's the best way to handle this? Like, is it better to kind of charge $1, which we wouldn't do as a law firm, than it is to charge nothing? Because highly suspicious, to charge nothing. And so, I think that if you're somebody who wants to help for free and you truly do want to help for free, all I say is that, kind of proceed with caution, right? How you're perceived as an Asian American may not be sort of in the mainstream of the folks who you're trying to help. And you're also kind of struggling with other issues, like within your organizations, how to deal with unconscious bias. And then, as a parent or as a child, I'm trying to protect my elderly parents, whether you're a daughter or a son, aunt, uncle, or whatever it is, how to sort of deal with this on a global level. So I think, net, like my bottom line is that, everyone needs to protect their own mental health and come at it with, kind of projecting, how can I come to peace with some of this and try to help my own way, but not be disappointed if I don't move the needle forward as much as I want to at every stage.
Yeah, that's great. Let's shift a bit to how lawyers can help. And we have a captive audience right now with a lot of experience and legal experience to offer. So Hassan, I'm wondering, in terms of the work that you're doing in the community, are there opportunities for people to volunteer, and are you seeing a lot of projects coming up with public education and some of the community activism that you've spoken about? How are volunteer lawyers able to sort of help advance those goals?
Yeah, thank you. I was going to say, to Chris's point, there's definitely been a shift towards putting more resources, more funding into AAPI organizations throughout the country, right? Especially here in New York City. I think this last year, the city invested in something called Partners Against the Hate, PATH, it's Path Forward. It's a program that funds the Asian American Federation, among other vulnerable community groups, in which that funding, they would end up keeping a portion of that funding and then awarding the rest of the funding to other AAPI organizations, and really building that infrastructure, that apparatus that's working towards hate crime prevention, hate crime response. And we've seen this happen at the local level, and we're seeing it happen at the federal level as well, with the bill that passed not too long ago, right, in which put more funding towards organizations that are working on direct response, on prevention efforts. And so we've seen a slew of brand new programs come out, right? Bystander intervention trainings, for example, is one thing, right, in which many of our community organizations that are AAPI here in the city, as well as the anti-violence ones, have been putting out these trainings throughout not just AAPI communities, but throughout the city, right? Open, whether it's law firms, whether it's going to NYCHA developments, whether it's going to various different places on, if you see something, how can you work towards trying to de-escalate the issue, but at the same time, maintaining your own safety, right, in this stuff. And so this sort of, we've done it in multiple languages. The Commission on Human Rights, which is phenomenal city agency, has gone into various places to do it in schools, do it in community meetings, community board meetings, wherever it might be, to really put out that information. At the same time, we've also looked at really building capacity in schools and having those very discussions that, Jennifer was talking about, right? Like, how do you have a conversation with youth about what's going on? And so the city Department of Education has recently worked with a couple of organizations out west that really work with teachers and educators and being able to have those really challenging conversations about what's happening and what students could do to be able to, work towards addressing that. And so I think that this sort of new infrastructure, this new apparatus with all these organizations receiving funding and really working towards really building out new programming, right? For example, there's, I think you probably have all seen, the efforts in really providing sort of services like walking with the senior from a senior center to a subway station, or to get a vaccine shot, where folks want to be able to have that safety, right, with that individual who's a volunteer. All these organizations in certain neighborhoods are looking for volunteers to work with them, and providing all the way down from that literal just escort me down to the subway to really providing intake for some of these cases that are coming in. There's been a big blossoming sort of apparatus of that that I would encourage folks to look into within the city. And I put in our website within the chat box that I encourage folks to go look at the website. We have the organizations that we're funding and that are receiving funds from other AAPI groups. Our funding model was really, let's work with experts within the Asian community, which are AAPI organizations, and then have them also direct where the money is going based on the needs as well, because we only know so much in government, right? And we have to really turn to communities themselves to really drive the conversation, and also to figure out or to be able to provide feedback on what solutions work best. And so all that money that's going, all those resources that are going in, it's been really a moment of self-determination for many of these communities and community organizations to determine where the funding is going. And there's obviously a need when it comes to volunteering. And we've seen a spike in that it's just unbelievable. We just recently went and we did, as Hannah was saying, a lot of our incidents have been happening in like Midtown South. And so we've gone to particular parts of the city and done days of visibility, which are pretty much us going down these major street corridors where we've seen these incidents take place, right? And really engaging with the businesses, the subway stations, the libraries, whatever it might be that is a public sort of spot, or folks going to get some sort of services or purchasing stuff, restaurants, really going down these streets and having conversations about the stuff that's been going on, right? And how they can also be a part of really pushing that change and making it better in that area. And I can tell you that, we've had volunteers, we've had like 15, 16, 20, 30 Asian seniors down to like Asian students, all of us collectively going down major street corridors to really spread the information. This sort of stuff is unprecedented. And it's actually quite amazing when you're walking down these major streets and neighborhoods that are not necessarily a majority AAPI by any means, but you're seeing signage out there saying, we support you, we stand with you. If you want to come and make a phone call, whatever it might be, to be able to get that sort of support services, or you want to contact the police, because we've had those conversations with these organizations, so with these businesses prior, folks feel a lot more comfortable going in. So there are a lot of volunteering opportunities. And I think our website's in there. My information's in there as well, too, as we're putting out more information on what's happening. Because again, as folks that have said on this call, this is the first time we've injected this sort of resources like in mass into communities. And so they're building out the apparatus, right? The organization that can really work towards doing it. And as we're seeing that happen, there's going to be more of a need. And we're excited to be able to get more folks involved as well, too. And so look at our website. I put my email in there as well to reach out directly, whether it's your firm, whether it's your organization, whatever it might be that's looking to do something for the day, for the evening, whatever it might be. We're always looking towards bringing back some of the stuff that we know that works, like the days of visibility, us going out in Midtown, us going out in Flushing, us going out in Chinatown, us going out in Harlem, wherever it is across the city, meeting with businesses, speaking to them. That sort of stuff is stuff that we want to continue. And so I would encourage folks to obviously reach out to us, and we're happy to be able to connect you to those organizations as well, and our efforts too.
Fabulous. Thanks so much, Hassan. I should also mention that AABANY has a program called HEART, Hate Eradication Active Response Team, a little bit more narrow than what you're talking about, Hassan, but we try to help victims navigate the process, really shepherd them through the decision-making process and inform them of options. And so it's not necessarily pushing them towards, the criminal justice system, but really helping to connect them to resources, mental health resources, counseling resources, financial resources, and if they are interested in pursuing a complaint, helping them to find counsel where needed, and trying to explain the process, providing translation services if that's needed. So
Absolutely. And just to add on to that, I was going to say that with any of the organizations, like even with AABANY, we've been passing out some of your materials as well to these places.
Of course, yes,
we
I
want
know.
to be able to
Thank
ensure
you.
that we're covering just as comprehensive as possible. And again, meeting people where they're at, what their comfort level is. It is their decision, right? And so if they choose to go the criminal justice route, that's fine. If not, then of course there's tremendous resources. And the city has pumped into mental health, into victim services that doesn't necessarily require a police report, right? You can just actually go directly and receive that help, right? Which I think is really important, especially when you're working with communities that are vulnerable, that might be less likely to report and may not feel necessarily comfortable.
Yeah, we've definitely found it helpful to offer navigator services, essentially, to help people understand, what's available and help them, collect information to make the decisions for themselves. And in conjunction with that, I know, Hannah, we've talked a bit about training some of our volunteers in the HEART program and trying to understand better what the process is on the criminal justice side, because of course many lawyers are not familiar with the criminal side, and their corporate lawyers or commercial litigators. If you wouldn't mind, we certainly will follow up and pursue the training aspect. But if you could give us and this audience just a very high level overview of the major decision points and how the process works, I guess, if there is a victim that is reporting and complaining and trying to move a prosecution forward.
Sure. So, the first point that the NYPD would get involved is, of course, when there's a report, and a lot can happen upon report. I think a lot of Asian and Asian American victims don't realize the importance of reporting right away. So that's something that I think advocates and pro bono lawyers can encourage if they hear about an incident, is the importance of calling 911. I can't emphasize enough the evidentiary value of having officers report to the scene right away. The investigation can start from the street, right? So we find oftentimes victims will report to social media or their friends or community leaders instead of reporting right away to the police. So that's one area I think advocates can help just spread the knowledge. I think the other area that advocates can play a critical role is sort of demystifying the criminal justice process for our victims. I think Jen is absolutely right that there's a distinction between Asian victims and Asian American victims. Asian American victims know their rights. They obviously they speak English. They know what they're entitled to. They're entitled to a fair shake. They're entitled. If they're not happy with the way, for example, a patrol cop is interviewing them or taking down the facts, they know to demand to speak to a supervisor. We don't see that in Asian victims. And Asian victims, I think, and by Asian, I'm covering, people in the older age group, but also individuals who've just recently moved to the US. Just as way of an illustration. I had an Asian victim who had been here for 1 month, and when we insisted that she meet with us in person for a full interview, her question was, "But do I have to pay for that?" So, there are a lot of myths and sources of confusion, and people don't know what the process is. So I think demystifying the process would be great. We can do that, but often it takes a lot more time, and we have to overcome the hurdle of individuals not necessarily trusting law enforcement. They are worried about, consequences to their immigration status, or whether this would be a financial burden on them. And a lot of times they're annoyed by the time they're speaking with us. And I don't blame them. The process of reporting a crime, hate crime aside, is very time consuming. It often requires a lot of patience. You have to tell your story multiple times. And so it really, I think if people understand that all of that is worth it, there's value in that. There's going to be, there are going to be a lot more options if you report, that would be helpful. What we emphasize in our office is a victim-centric approach to combating these crimes. You know, we recognize that these victims require a little bit more care than your average victim, right? So they may not speak that language. We might need to set them up with an interpreter. They may be fearful of taking public transportation to even come to our office. So we provide public transportation, car service free of cost when there is, a demonstrated fear of taking the subway, or let's say the crime happened on the subway and now they're traumatized. So we can do a lot, but it really requires the victim being on board. When the victim wants nothing to do with the process, or is scared about meeting with us, then we really depend on advocates in the community to share that knowledge that, there can only be good that can come from reporting the incident and working with the DA's office. With discovery reform, I think a lot of victims don't know that we can protect their identity. If they are afraid of the defendant finding out where they work or where they live or who they are, we can take certain steps to protect their identity from disclosure to the defense. So I think advocates can only do good. In the sex crime field, there are sex crime advocates that exist for the purpose of walking a sex crime victim through the process. And I think there can only be good that can come from pro bono lawyers such as yourselves, working with victims and really navigating them through the process, which, it would take us hours to explain the process of what grand jury is like and what you can expect going forward. And I think cutting down on that time can not only help us as ADAs who, with heavy caseloads who need to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt, but it can help witnesses and victims feel heard and that their case matters.
Great. Now, Jen, as someone who has represented some of the victims, are there any sort of tips or lessons learned that you can offer to folks in our audience that are going to get involved or have already been involved?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't like, I'm not, you're more of a born and bred criminal lawyer than I am. You've done much more of this. I came into this as a patent litigator, and I honestly called up my partner, Loretta Lynch, and said, can you give me a primer on criminal law?
But not everyone has access to the former attorney general, so.
But sort of here, the most important stuff she gave me, other than just kind of generally this is the process, was one, you have to have a good translator, because the translator is the voice of the sort of victim in court. And so she actually, contacted translators that she had used when she was heading the office in Eastern District, and did me a favor by getting in touch with them. And I think, not for nothing, we've had some clients who have run through 3 or 4 translators. So don't assume that this is a ministerial piece. This is a really important aspect. And then the second thing she just said was that, every community activist has an agenda, and they often use law enforcement as the foil. They're out to get you. They want something from you. They want you to testify for their own benefit, blah, 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 right? And this it was very new to me because I always believed, and I still do believe, that a hate crime is a crime against the community. The reason we give greater punishment and we have greater sort of kind of focus on it is because we say, as a society, having these kinds of hate crimes is not something we contemplate. So sort of the punishment is also, the community has a say in it. But what that leads to is every community leader feeling they have a say in it, right? So an example would be if the kind of sentencing guidelines said 10 years, some community leaders are going to come out and say, well, that's not enough. And someone might be like, that's too much, right? So I think that the nature of hate crime being a community crime leads to sort of everything you can contemplate in the political arena, except it's pitting, in my cases, at least because they're Chinatown cases, everybody in Chinatown who historically has fought with each other all in one kind of encapsulation. And so I got a front row seat to kind of see all that, having not really, as someone who's Asian American, having not really been in the Chinese community, having not been part of it from like kind of, I was raised in the suburbs, like not really knowing and just being like, wow, there's a lot going on here. And, the fact that I can at least like read some of the Chinese newspapers and see what's going on, like that was incredibly useful. And then, kind of the last piece of this is, I got connected to various people around the country who are representing anti-Asian hate crimes. It's very useful to have support because I think we're all feeling it out. I haven't met a single person from California or from DC or anyone else who's kind of doing this kind of high profile work who actually has like really great guidance, other than like, it's good to have like a text chain going that says, hey, do you have another translator I might be able to use? Or have you seen this happen? And then, kind of the last piece of this is just that you're not, while you are trying to shepherd the victim through the process, you're really, there's also like a PR role. There's also like, a financial role. And most importantly, there's a question of whether they trust you at all. Why should they trust some like, big name lawyer from a big name law firm, right? What does the name Loretta Lynch mean to somebody who's in the Asian community? Like, I don't know what it means, right? It turns out it doesn't mean that much to most people. And so I think that we are at a point in our community where sort of, unlike maybe perhaps some other communities, there is no one name. Like, I can't go, Young Chen is marching in or Chris Kwok is coming and don't worry, everything will be fine. There's a lot of factionalization. So different communities have different people who they turn to. Like the Korean community might go to certain people, the Chinese community of a certain region might go to certain people. There might be a separate one for the South Asian community. But the reality is that, we're, as the people who are kind of pro bono counsel, we are comprised of all of those communities. And so there have been times where we have had to bring in people from a certain community into a hate crime case, even because I am not the right person. And I have seen in spades that being a woman in particular communities is a harm rather than a benefit. I've had to ask my male partners to sit in on many meetings because I don't have the credibility as a woman in particular communities. And this is not a criticism of the community, but more coming from compassionate understanding and kindness of saying like, look, I may not look like the right lawyer for all Asian hate crime victims, even though I feel like I have the credentials to do it, right? And Loretta Lynch, same thing. They're like, well, she's a woman. What would she know, right? And you're like, okay, how do I explain this to you, right? So the people on this Zoom, I don't think would suffer from those issues, but we live in a very privileged, rarefied world where we are facile with institutions and governments and sort of kind of living in this society where we have computers and can do Zoom and not living minute to minute where our calling card on our cell phone is about to expire, right? And so I just think that the sort of cultural gap or maybe social economic gap, but also kind of community gap is pretty harsh. And that might speak volumes to the fact that we as lawyers historically have not been part of the communities that we are now trying to serve as pro bono counsel. I mean, I don't think any of my associates live in Chinatown. And so, that's something, right, to kind of think about as we kind of go forward is the stratification of society and the kind of wealth disparity and the social economic sort of gaps hurt us as the Asian community. And we are the most stratified community, right, from helping each other and coming together in sort of, in the words of the AABANY, I guess, thing for unity and justice and equity.
It's a very eloquent way to sum up. We are starting to see questions come in on the Q&A line, and I want to encourage everyone to send questions if they have them. But one of the earlier ones, I think I'm going to turn to Chris for, and the question is really about allyship and is there efforts undertaken to reach out to other community organizations that aren't focused on Asian issues, to learn from them, to work with them? Is there sort of a broader movement happening? And what have you seen in speaking to these organizations?
Yeah, no, I mean, within the Asian American community at the very beginning, the South Asians who experienced intense anti-Asian sentiment post 9/11 have worked with this issue really on and off in the last decade. And they reached out as soon as sort of the anti-Asian movement focused on East Asians and said, how can we help? And so that was really, amazing to experience. Right from the beginning, they're extending their hand. And Jewish groups, the Anti-Defamation League, were out there sort of putting on webinars and things like that. And then, and so we know that the hands are out there, because quite honestly, if you boil down anti-Semitism, anti-Asian hate, anti-Muslim sentiment, it's all the same. That's why when people during like, oh, do I have to support BLM versus anti-Asian hate? Do I have to choose? And we're like, no, sit down. It's okay. If you follow the thread, we're all fighting the same thing. So it's important for us who are activists in the space to carry that message and to educate people who haven't thought about this before. So that's the one thing. And then quite honestly, I think for the Asian Americans that are really involved right now in this, they're like the conversation we had earlier, stuff is coming together right now. And so although we won't see those, we won't see at this very moment these programs and these working together, it's happening on the back end. People are thinking about it, working on things. And people and the general public and Asian Americans should hold nonprofits and government accountable, I would say, in the next year and beyond, as to what is going to come out, the partnerships that will come, and they will come. But I can't think of anything right now. But I'll tell you that the offer has been made. People are talking, but there's nothing concrete that I can point to right now, except to reiterate the point that we're in the middle of a shift of building these programs within Asian American nonprofits and the community.
Has there been and I guess any panelist that wants to speak to this, but has there been a lot of education of the Asian community about the concept of bias and discrimination? I mean, obviously there's sort of phenomena of hatred and incidents being directed at Asians, but there seems to also be some education that's been happening where Asians now empathize more with other organizations, are getting more active. You mentioned BLM, for example, in the efforts and the challenges that other communities have faced. And as one questioner has pointed out, some of these incidents are also Asian on Asian incidents, and given the stratification among the Asian community, that education is also very important. Has anyone sort of had experiences or thoughts on that phenomenon of educating the Asian community of some of these trends?
I mean, it's fascinating because Asians and Asian Americans, for the most part, and speaking very generally, like, they've sort of had the luxury of not, particularly East Asians, like, they've not thought too much. They've very much focused on sort of education and advancing in their careers, and not had to think too much about race because they thought it didn't really include them, or they didn't know where they fit in, and they didn't have sort of skin in the game to fight. And I think the anti-Asian era of this year has been a shock to many in the community. So I think that it is an opportunity for us to have conversations and do education for those that have been more active in sort of the work around race relations, and to teach. And that is a struggle, because at the same time that we explain sort of to the general sort of like mainstream public, we have to turn around and actually do education within the community as well. And so we're doing both, like we're building a bridge in both directions.
I also think that there's an elephant in the room, and maybe this is specific to my firm, because we, our firm, as Karen remembers, sort of the Black and Asian and kind of like other, any other Hispanic lawyers all kind of come together. But there are a lot of questions in the community around sort of whether the perpetrators of anti-Asian hate crimes are Black. And I have been asked that repeatedly from people within the firm, outside the firm. And I would be remiss not saying that people are scared to ask that because they think it's not PC at a certain level. And they ask about the data. The data I've seen doesn't always bear that out. I think that there's some high profile crimes that certainly indicate that the ones that they're focused on are sort of Black on Asian crimes. There's also obviously a huge mental health component to this, right? Because you see that some of the perpetrators are not of sound mind, and they say, it's clear that there's something else that's going on in terms of social safety net. The way that we saw this play out was sort of in the Manhattan DA's race, and kind of, we were sort of supportive of many different candidates, but our firm in particular is very close to Alvin Bragg. And I think he's very close to AABANY as well, and has, was very kind in terms of looking at some of these issues. And so, I think one of the things, I think some of you may have been on the Zoom where he said, I'm a son of Harlem. And I think I said, will you also be a son of Chinatown? Will you also be a son of Koreatown? Will you also be a son, right, of kind of these other communities? And he said, of course I will be. And I think that unity concept hasn't always come through. We have continued to hear from people in the community that they don't trust, right, people who don't look like them. And so to the point of, it might be Asian on Asian racism, but it could also just be Asians being racist, right, towards other non-Asians. And so how you bring together communities historically have not come together, I think is kind of a challenging issue. And, I think within the kind of rarefied air that I breathe, where kind of there's not that many people of color and you all come together, you don't have those challenges because you're all like, there's only 10 of you or something, right? And so you kind of all get along. But I think when you look at communities, New York remains fairly segregated. New York remains sort of stratified. I think that in the pandemic, all of those things got exacerbated. We stayed within the communities we were in. We did less of the subway together. We did more of, we just hang out with the people that we know. And I think as we sort of reemerge into the world and the pandemic hopefully comes towards, an end with kind of vaccines and everything, there will be some transition period about that. And I think that there's an opportunity there to basically build bridges, but there's also a risk that we don't do that and we stay within sort of little cloistered, kind of era that we breathe, whether it's your social economic kind of, little cloister, or it's your race, kind of racial cloister, or whatever it is. And so, to the point of kind of community building bridges, I'm a big fan of sort of saying that you should participate in local politics, because your neighbors are of all kinds. And if you participate in it, you will get to know your neighbors, and it's hard to not like your neighbors once you get to know them. But I think that in New York City, there aren't that many people who are very passionate about local politics. I know Chris is, but I don't know that everybody is, right? So it's, like, I mean, literally, like, do you care about the manhole vibrating outside your street, right? That's local politics. You care that in Chinatown there was, a flood and that there's no power to a particular street. It's hard to care about those issues if you feel mentally stressed and your kids are not in school or whatever it is. Maybe COVID is stressful for you. But I think starting to care about your neighbor and not just yourself is sort of the key to building community bridges. And I think that's what we've been at least trying to encourage of the lawyers that I work with in the pro bono aspect of not just, you're going to run in and get, help someone get a conviction. No, this is hate crime is a crime against the community. So the broader question is, what are you doing for your own community?
And I would just add in, like, the bystander intervention training is really speaking to what Jennifer is saying, is how can allies, how can communities really build those bridges? There's absolutely a hunger out there, right? And it's something that I've seen through the course of our work in the last year, in which how can we have community organizations coming up saying, what can we do to be able to support, our AAPI community, neighbors, right? And so there's something definitely out there. I do see it absolutely, hopefully, as we're coming out of this pandemic, as Jennifer said, that it is solidifying far more. And it does become something a lot more powerful as well.
We had a, go ahead.
I just make one more comment, and this sort of relates to the CLE codes being shatter and sticky, but I don't, it's not for nothing that I think everyone on the Zoom, not including me, I think, has shattered the ceiling in some way to basically take on these issues. I don't want to sort of miss the fact that there is a mental health aspect that comes with that to be representative of the communities. And so, I really do thank all of you for what you're doing. I know Chris has talked about the personal kind of consequences of being so outspoken about anti-Asian hate. And I don't want to miss that, because I think all of you are doing a fundamental service by devoting a lot of your professional lives and personal lives to this issue. And it's a very thorny issue, but it has a huge impact on people personally. So, I think maybe the CLA codes, speak to that, which is shattering something, and there are sticky effects.
All right. We had an early question about the NYPD and whether, Hannah, you've seen any reluctance to categorize things as hate crimes. Are there any sort of factors going on behind the scenes as to whether or not things should be categorized in a particular way because it raises additional burdens or consequences?
I think that the hate crimes law leaves a lot of room for debate. And I think that is part of the reason why there may be, and this is not specific to anti-Asian hate crimes, in all hate crimes, there is a, hold on, is this really a hate crime pause? And that's at a lot of different levels. It can be at the response level, but it also happens in our office, in full disclosure. The law is written in a way that it's broad enough to capture a lot of incidents, but it's also vague enough to eliminate some incidents. So just to describe the law real quickly, the New York law makes it a hate crime if the defendant intentionally targets the victim or commits the act in whole or in substantial part based on a belief or perception about their protected identity. In whole or in substantial part can mean so many different things. What we find is that where the facts are very clear, someone punches someone calling them an anti-Asian slur, everyone agrees this is a hate crime. Where the facts get a little bit muddy, where there's some sort of provocation, as harmless and benign as a provocation might be by the victim. For example, if the victim is the one who accidentally bumps the perpetrator on the subway, and then the perpetrator punches them, calling them an anti-Asian slur, that raises certain questions. And they're valid questions. I think if my rule of thumb is if lawyers struggle with legal language, and then obviously, non-lawyers will struggle with the language. So it's not necessarily that the NYPD is reluctant to charge or classify something as a hate crime. I think the law leaves room for a lot of debate. And I think Jen's absolutely right that there are a lot of voices that want to be heard. And so I think when we get to cases where there is some sort of catalyst for the incident, there will be questions raised about whether certain facts are a hate crime. I think the solution is to encourage people to keep an open mind. And what we do on our end is we try not to come to a conclusion until a full investigation is done. So we do deep dives into social media if that's available, if that's an avenue for investigation. We make sure that we review all the body cam footage that might have picked up a perpetrator's gratuitous statements at the scene. We try to look at from every angle to see if there are additional facts and pieces of evidence that make it clear that something's a hate crime. But I think there's just a lot of room for debate because of the way the law is written.
Has there been any sort of training or more coordination, I guess, between your office since you've taken over this role of the hate crimes unit and the NYPD on this issue?
We are working on it. I think professional relationships go a long way. I think rather than, marching in and saying, we as a DA's office are going to retrain all of your patrol cops, I think the way we've approached this is to sort of like a grassroots organization might do is police officer by police officer, incident by incident. We want to make sure that officers are asking the right question. So we've done some informal training with the NYPD. The Hate Crimes Task Force and our office have a very close relationship, as I mentioned before. And I think that's gone that's done a great thing, a service to Manhattan. The fact that our unit can confer with the NYPD anytime that there's a pre-arrest investigation, I think is huge. We don't take it for granted, and we really appreciate having that open line of communication with the NYPD. So that's a work in progress, Karen. That's actually one of the things that I want to focus more on is joint training and joint just dialogue with the NYPD.
And then I would just add on the city's end that the NYPD it's sort of unique now that the NYPD itself is releasing data, right, with relation to hate crimes on potential hate crimes. When an incident happens right there and then, instead of before only releasing stuff that's been classified as a hate crime, they're now in a situation where if they feel that this could be possibly something, they're sending it, they're releasing that information that sort of is unique to what the police department's done in the past. And now our office, the Office for the Prevention of Hate Crimes, has a notification system that's been set up. in which when we do receive an incident that's potentially a hate crime, whether it's an assault or not, advocates throughout the city, including API organizations, have wanted more notice and transparency on that. And so when something does occur, we end up sending out a notification to like more than 500 partners throughout the city, including community organizations. So folks know, oh, okay, something has happened here that could be a hate crime. The NYPD is investigating it, and we can follow up with the police department accordingly. And those notifications come out on anything that's a violent hate crime that relates to any protected class. But within, as we've seen throughout the course of just the anti-Asian incidents itself, that's been something that we've been putting out a lot more on. I think we've done probably 100 some so far this year, in which we get follow-up from city council offices, federal elected offices, from community organizations. And if your organization or you're working as a pro bono lawyer itself want to be added to that, you can definitely contact me as well too. Hello.
All right. Thank you so much, Hassan. Thank you, Hannah, Jen, Chris, and Russell, who had to leave a little early, for taking the time to join our panel this morning. I'm sure on behalf of all of our audience, we really appreciate your insights and experience and you sharing your thoughts with us. There are materials for this program that have been circulated. It includes all of the materials referenced and shared on today's presentation. So I encourage you all to look at that. And with that, we are concluded for today. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you so much.
Everyone, thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Of course.
Great.
Thank you.
Good job. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.